All right. So today felt like one of those days where I was basically cleaning up a mess before I even got into the game. So I figured House Flipper was kind of the perfect choice. We had a really bad storm last night and a lot of rain, a lot of wind, and I just did not sleep well. So I've been tired all day, already kind of foggy, and then on top of that, most of my day got spent trying to build out a process for something that really should have been thought through a long time ago. And of course, instead of that process being built slowly over time, like it probably should have been, it had to be done quickly under pressure, with everybody suddenly needing answers. So, yeah. If the theme of today is fixing things after the fact, this game is very on brand. Because apparently, whether it's real life or virtual life, I am once again being called to walk into somebody else's chaos and make it make sense. Hey, welcome back to the channel. If you're new here, I'm the kind of person that likes to play calmer games like this and talk through real life stuff at the same time. Sometimes it's life, sometimes it's work, sometimes it's just whatever has been sitting on my mind that day. I like games like House Flipper for this because they give me something to do with my hands while I actually think. It's not just about the gameplay for me, it's more like the gameplay gives me room to talk. So if you like this kind of content, more laid back gameplay, real conversation, thoughts about work, life, stress, all of that, go ahead and subscribe, like the video, and definitely leave a comment because I do like seeing what other people think about this kind of stuff too. All right, let's get into it. So today was stressful, not loud stressful, not dramatic stressful, just mentally heavy. I had one of those days where the biggest task wasn't necessarily physical hard, but it took so much thinking that by the end of it, I felt more drained than if I had been running around all day. What I had to what I had to work on was a process that I didn't start. I didn't initiate it, and honestly, from my point of view, it was something that should have been built way earlier and way more gradually. But instead, it got to the point where now it needs to exist immediately. And suddenly, it lands on my shoulders to make sense of it. And that's always frustrating for me because it's one thing to improve something that already exists. It's another thing entirely to be handed something half formed or not really formed at all and be expected to create structure around it quickly while also somehow accounting for everybody's role in it. And that was the hardest part today. It wasn't just write the process down. It was understand how this process is used from different vantage points, understand what each person's role is, understand what each person is probably looking for, and then create something that works for all of them. And I'm sitting there thinking, okay, but I'm not in all of those positions. So a lot of the time, the only thing I can really do is guess. And that is exhausting in a way that I think people don't always appreciate. Because when you're trying to build something for multiple people and you don't fully live in all of their roles, you're not just writing, you're translating, you're interpreting, you're trying to predict needs, you're trying to anticipate confusion before it happens. You're trying to make something clear enough that people with very different perspectives can all use it and hopefully come away with the same understanding. That is not simple work. And the part that really gets me is that so much of this could have been created slowly over time. That's what I keep thinking about. Some things are just better when they're built gradually, when you can observe how people actually use them, when you can make adjustments, when you can notice the weak spots before it becomes urgent. But instead, people tend to wait until something becomes a problem, and then suddenly everybody wants the clean version right now. It's very backwards. And I feel like that happens in so many places, not just work. People don't think ahead because thinking ahead takes effort, it takes time, It takes slowing down long enough to ask, okay, if this keeps going, then what happens next? And a lot of people don't do that. They deal with the step in front of them. And then once the consequences of that show up later, now somebody has to come in and clean it up. And usually, the people cleaning it up are not the people who created the mess. That's the part. That is really the part. And I know I'm not the only person who deals with this. So if you've ever had one of those situations where something should have been planned way earlier, but instead it gets dropped on you at the last minute, and now you have to be the one to make it make sense, let me know in the comments because I know that is not a unique experience. I feel like there are so many people who are basically professional cleanup crews in their workplaces, and nobody really says it that way. And what makes it harder is when you care. Because if you don't care, you can just throw something together and move on. But when you actually care, whether it makes sense, whether it works, whether it helps, whether it holds up from multiple perspectives, then you end up putting a lot more of your brain into it. And that's where I was today. I was trying to think through each person's role, what they would need, where things might break down, what wouldn't make sense, where people would get confused, where assumptions were being made that probably shouldn't be made. And again, that's tough when you're doing it from your own vantage point and not theirs. There's only so much you can know from the outside. And I think that's another thing people don't always understand. Sometimes when you're building something, you're not working from certainty. You're working from inference. You're working from experience. You're working from pattern recognition. You're working from this is probably where the friction is going to be, even if nobody has spelled it out clearly. That's a lot of mental labor. And I know I'm saying that a lot, but it really was one of those days where I felt the weight of that. Also, not sleeping well definitely did not help. That storm last night had me up and off and on, and it's wild how much lack of sleep changes your whole day. Everything just feels heavier. Things that would normally be frustrating becomes 10 times more frustrating. Thinking takes so much longer. Your patience is lower, your energy is lower, and then if your day requires a lot of mental clarity, you're already operating at a disadvantage before you even start. So between being tired and then having to think through something this layered, I was just done. Like, I was mentally done. But one interesting thing that happened today, and honestly, probably the one thing that balanced the whole day out just a little bit, it was a message I got from an old boss. And they were asking me questions about an old process I used before because they're trying to create more efficiency and they want people who are more dedicated, more intentional, and more thoughtful about how things are done. And what stood out to me was what they remembered about me. They remembered that I was the kind of person who always tries to make things make sense, that I worked with what I had, that even if the tools weren't ideal, I still found a way to make it work. And I really like that because that is exactly how I see myself. I've always been the type where, okay, if the proper tool isn't available, I'm still going to figure out how to get the job done. If I need a screwdriver, but all I have is a flathead, then I guess I'm using the flathead and we're going to make it work. Is it ideal? No, it's not. Should there have been better support? Probably. But am I going to sit there and act helpless? Also, no. And I think that kind of resourcefulness is a real strength. But I also think there is a downside to it. Because when you become known as the person who can make things work no matter what, people start expecting that from you all the time. And after a while, your ability to adapt becomes the excuse for why they don't need to prepare better. And that's the trap. People see competence and think, oh, good, this person can handle it. And it's like, yeah, I can handle it. That does not mean I should have to handle all of it. That does not mean this was set up correctly. That does not mean the pressure belongs here just because I'm capable of carrying it. That's something I think about a lot, especially if you're somebody who naturally thinks ahead, naturally notices problems, naturally wants things to make sense, naturally wants to leave something better than how you found it. You will get handed more. Not always because people respect your skill, sometimes just because they know you won't let it fall apart. And that can get old really fast. And it can feel like the reward for being competent is more cleanup. And I don't think people talk about that enough and talk about it honestly. Because on the one hand, it does mean something when people remember your work ethic. It means a lot to me that my old boss remembered not just that I worked hard, but how I worked. They remembered that I was thoughtful, that I cared, that I made things work with the tools that I had. And to me, that matters. A lot of times people remember output. They remember whether you got something done. But it means something different when somebody remembers your effort, your mindset, your approach, your dedication. And that hits different. And I appreciated it. Because today I really needed that reminder. I needed the reminder that even though days like this are frustrating, there is value in being the kind of person who cares enough to think things through. There is value in being the kind of person who wants clarity. There is value in being the kind of person who takes a messy situation and try to turn it into something usable, even when it's annoying, even when it's unfair, even when you're tired. Now, do I think that means people should just keep loading that onto the same person over and over again? No, absolutely not. There's a difference between being dependable and being overused. And I think a lot of people live right in that space. They're appreciated, but also leaned on too hard. They're respected, but also assumed upon. They're trusted, but also stretched thin. And sometimes the very thing that makes them valuable is the thing that gets them overburdened. That's real. And I think that's why something as simple as this game feels good today. Because at least in House Flipper, when you walk into a mess, you already know what the assignment is. Clean it, fix it, put things in order, make it look better than it did before. Real life messes are harder because a lot of the time, nobody even agrees on what the mess is. That's the true nonsense right there. At least in this house, the trash is visibly trash. The dirt is visibly dirt. The walls that need to be fixed are clearly messed up. Real life is not like that. In real life, half the battle is convincing people that a problem exists before you can even solve it. And then by the time everybody agrees it's a problem, now it's urgent. Now it's under pressure. Now everybody wants a clean fix immediately. So maybe that's why this game feels kind of therapeutic to me right now. It's straightforward. There is a satisfaction in seeing disorder and then being able to directly do something about it. Sweep it up, sell it, paint over it, rebuild it. Done. No politics. No guessing everyone's vague expectations. No trying to account for 10 different perspectives with incomplete information. Just, this room is ugly. Let's fix it. Beautiful. Honestly, maybe that's the part of why calmer games work so well for this kind of commentary. They give you enough room to think, but they also kind of steady you a little bit. They let you work through stuff without feeling like you have to perform every second. So if you like this kind of setup, more thoughtful gameplay, more real talk, more let's process life while we're clean fake houses, go ahead and like this video, subscribe to the channel, and share it with somebody who likes this kind of vibe too. And leave a comment because I'm actually curious. Are you the person at your job or in your family or in your life who ends up fixing what other people didn't plan for? Because I really do think there are a lot of us out there. And I also think there's a difference between being capable and being endlessly available. That's something I'm still thinking through. Just because you can carry something does not automatically mean it belongs on your back. That's a sentence right there. And that's probably one of the bigger thoughts I'm taking from today. Yes, I can adapt. Yes, I can build with imperfect tools. Yes, I can think through things from multiple sides and try to create something useful. But I also think there's need, there's a need to be more shared and have shared responsibility in general. More foresight, more willingness from other people to think beyond their immediate role and ask how something affects the entire process. Because if nobody does that, then all the burden falls on the people who do. And eventually, those people get tired. Today, I was just so tired. Not just because of the storm, not just because of the lack of sleep, but because I spent so much of the day doing that invisible kind of work where you're trying to make everything connect, trying to make everything clear, trying to make everything usable. And half the time, people don't even understand how much effort that takes. That kind of work is real. Thinking is work. Clarifying is work. Anticipating problems is work. Translation between people and systems and roles is work. And I wish more people understood that before they dump it on somebody and call it simple. Because it's not simple. It might look simple once it's done. That's the irony. Once someone really thoughtful or thoughtfully puts a process together, everybody else looks at it like, oh, okay, that makes sense. Right. It makes sense because somebody spent hours thinking through all of the ways it wouldn't. And that's the part nobody sees. And that's probably why I respected hearing from my old boss today, because it reminded me that sometimes people do notice. Maybe not always in the moment, maybe not even when you expect them to, but sometimes they do remember the person who made it make sense. They remember the person who showed up with imperfect tools and still found a way to do the job well. And that means something. So I guess if there's anything positive I'm pulling from today, it's that. Even on frustrating days, your way of working still matters. The care you put in still matters. The effort to make things clearer, smoother, more usable, that still matters. Even if today I would have preferred to be left alone and not have to prove that in real time. Honestly, I think that's the other thing. Sometimes being capable is cool in theory, but in practice, you're just tired and would love somebody else to have thought ahead for once. Just once. A rare and majestic event. But anyway, that was pretty much my day. A lot of thinking, a lot of trying to understand everybody's role, a lot of trying to create clarity from my vantage point, even when I don't fully sit in everybody else's seat. A lot of frustration, but also one meaningful reminder that the way I work has value, even in places I'm no longer in. And I do appreciate that. So while I sit here and clean up this digital house, I guess the question I'm kind of sitting with is this: why is it so often the people who think ahead that end up cleaning up what everybody else didn't? That's a big one. And if you've ever felt that too, truly, let me know. because I know I'm not the only one. Also, side note, if you're still here and you're enjoying this kind of commentary, make sure you subscribe, hit like, and share the video. That helps a lot, especially if you want more of these kinds of sit-down gameplay discussions where I'm not just talking about the game, I'm talking about actual life while the game is happening. Because honestly, that's probably the lane I'm most interested in right now. All right, I think I'm going to leave this one here. This was actually a really good game for today because I needed something that let me slow down a little bit while I work through what was on my mind. And if nothing else, it was nice to spend some time fixing a mess. I was at least honest about being a mess. If you made it to the end, thank you for being here. Seriously. If this kind of content is your thing, calmer gameplay, real conversations, life stuff, work stuff, all of that. Make sure you subscribe, like the video, leave a comment, and share it with somebody who might like this style too. And in the comments, tell me this. Are you usually the person who ends up fixing things other people didn't think through? Because I have a feeling a lot of us are living the exact experience. All right, I'll see you in the next one.